and welcome, brothers and sisters of the multiverse. Today I want to talk about virtual signaling. We know them. We all know them. And we all, I think, or most of us at least, fell into one of those traps or another. With good intentions. With what seemed at that time to have been the whole truth, or at least near enough to that. It's not a bad thing to believe in something, to try to change the world for the better, per se. It's just that sometimes, right, I think I'll also mention it, that famous quote, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I made up 4 main types with the most traps people fall into. Some people still assume that facts and fact-checking and information live in some neutral vacuum rather than inside a weaponized epistemic battlefield. We cannot rely on the facts versus misinformation framing, because that framing itself is a trap. People get easily captured by distorted narratives, propaganda loops, pseudo-facts, selective data, fact-checkers as narrative enforcers, emotional hijacks, identity protection, social group reinforcement, coercive moral framing, algorithmic bias, trauma-based worldview, ego-based moral superiority, and hero dramatization. The main 4 types. The narrative imprinted defender. Born into a story but never learned to question it, is the first one. The second is the overwhelmed empath savior. Reacts to emotional suffering, so he joins the first cause that promises relief. The third is the ego-first martyr. Their identity, I'm the good one. So it leads to that activism becomes self-image maintenance. Number 4, the identity-fused activist. Because they see the cause as their identity, so any disagreement on their narrative feels like personal annihilation. These 4 cover everyone involved in fighting the good fight, while missing the bigger picture. Now, the real issues. Fact-checking does nothing if the fact-checkers are part of the narrative machine. Because for those 4 types, fact-check equals moral authority stamp. But only if those facts confirm their narrative, right? The second is the official source, which is a tribe signal, right? Third is the expert as a priest of their worldview. Next is misinformation as heresy. Common sense is whatever the herd believes. Conspiracy is whatever threatens identity cohesion. That's so tricky because every fact-checked fact could be true, could be false, could be taken out of context or whatever, comes out of some not or misrepresented data from some statistics or whatever, not taking 8% of the truth of the whole into account. The official source, right, thing. Also, it's sometimes right, it's sometimes propaganda infused, and sometimes, I mean, who pays who to say what or not to say what, or to say something in a certain way and other things in other certain ways, you know, this euphemisms and dysphemisms, tricks, experts. Also, there are those I mean, I can go on and on, but think of every source of information in through the lens of who pays them and what greater interest do those people have who pay them their salaries. You know, sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. But not taking anything for granted, sure, but also and that can also be used as a trap. But it's important to keep in mind, what would it do if it is believed? What would it prevent? What would it create? And each of those, again, is or can be exactly what someone wanted in the first place. You know, this how this works. You want to implement something, right? You know people would be against it, so you create a situation where people would demand it through a certain narrative which something is represented. That's also out there. Don't fool yourself. But to know when and for whom and for what, and which can also be each of just a stepping stone to something even greater. there are certain agendas out there, even in official documents, and let's take something other ridiculous. How would one bring people to the point that they suddenly accept the idea, suddenly, relatively suddenly, I'll come to that eyebrows are out. We should all shave our eyebrows. The idea is ridiculous, right? How would you implement that idea and make it a global phenomenon? A few easy steps. First, it comes through it's emphasized in some scientific and medical and papers and such, how much bacteria and stuff is accumulated there. Not mentioning that it's perfectly normal. And we have them everywhere. We can wash our face and still there are a few trillions left. Just reality, get over it. But if you frame it like, oh my God, and only emphasis on there are quadrillions of bacteria on each hair of each of the eyebrow. I mean, it starts with official scientific papers. Then it goes into more mainstream. They keep at it, they keep telling the story, and it spreads. And then the first celebrities and such is way easier, right? You pay one of them, one of the currently in celebrities, to shave off his or her or their eyebrows, and they get interviewed and what's happening and such, and they say, this scientific paper and such, and look how progressive I am and something, and they shave their eyebrows and keep at it. Others catch on to that and do the same, and that becomes in, right? And then suddenly most of celebrities are doing that, and then normal people are starting to do that, and that gets normalized. So once it's normalized and the majority of the population is on that train, then the shaming begins of those who still have their eyebrows in their faces, And through shaming and the group social pressures and such, everyone is soft forced, let's say, to shave their eyebrows. And then that becomes the new normal. It's ridiculous how easy people accept these new normals just because it makes sense, right? Because the first fact is not a lie. There are bacteria on our eyebrows. Get over it. It never was an issue throughout human history of 300,000 years or so. But now it is suddenly, really. But that first fact didn't mention that they're everywhere. They're also there, but there is no hair. What? Are you gonna peel your skin off? They're underneath too. You know how ridiculous ideas without some critical thinking, yes, but also common sense and accepting of reality. Failure leads to such new trends. I mean, it's fact checked, right? It's common sense, right? Or is it? You know? It's a ridiculous example, but many of those facts that push certain agendas are equally as ridiculous when you think about it. When you research a little and when you are not triggered by your EU response, you know, that's an old trick. Hitler used it too. They called Jews cockroaches and such, you know, just to trigger that EU effect, that disgust lever, you know. Okay, I think I'm at a point. So, the four types. Number one, the narrative imprinted defender. I trust the news, the experts, the institutions. They know better than me. Why they're stuck? They grew up in systems that reward obedience, not inquiry. They outsource epistemology to authority. They confuse familiarity with truth. They assume that if many people say it, it's probably right. And the fact checkers are like the adults in the room, where the propaganda hook grabs them. They don't notice framing, omissions, or selective data. They mistake consistency of messaging for validity. 64,200 repetitions make one truth, Bernard. Right? They believe motivations are stated motivations. Yes. see, that's also a thing. People, the first explanation they hear about that certain new topic is the easiest to swallow because there is no reference point. And why else would they do it and such? And just because you don't know the reason why else someone tries to push a certain agenda doesn't mean that there are no other possible reasons. Right? How to crack their shell. People, we try to help get out of that. You never attack the institution, you attack the mechanism. Ask things like, why do all the news channels use the same wording for this story? With the same connotations, with the same sales pitches, with the same euphemisms and euphemisms and such. Right. Ask, do you remember any time in history when experts were wrong, but at the time everyone believed them? I mean, history is full of that, right? What information would change your mind? Not the content, the type of information. Those questions bypass resistance because they don't target their identity. They target their method of knowing. Number 2, the overwhelmed empath savior. Oh, people are suffering, I have to do something. Yes, of course. It's a good thing. It comes from the heart, it comes from a good place. But how and why are important. Why they're stuck. They respond to emotional images. Children, animals, disasters, etc. They don't check context. The pain is enough. The emotional response is enough, and it bypasses critical thinking. They assume the first narrative that says we're helping must be correct. Right. But read a few from Ivan Illich on that. They see doubt as cruelty or as allowance of enabling of atrocities or something. The propaganda hook and emotion first messaging. Here's a victim, here's the villain, here's the simple fix. Right? The simpler the narratives, the simpler the more generalized it is, the easier people accept it, the black and white thinking and such. Right? They never ask if the narrative is selectively edited. And that can be in so many ways. How to crack their shell. You validate their compassion. Then show how it's been exploited. Say things like, you care deeply and that's beautiful. But doesn't it disturb you that the corporations use the same emotional imagery to sell war products or political control? Or what if somebody used your empathy as a weapon without your consent? And questions like, do you want to help or be used? sometimes it's very unobvious how the agenda is not even directly related to the issue, but is not only the next but the second next logical step if you accept the narrative. So it's even harder to or better said, it's easier for the majority to say, oh, that's too far-fetched, or that's a conspiracy theory or whatever. They know this. They know that the majority would see it exactly like that. Sometimes it really is. There are many ridiculous conspiracies out there. But there are also a few true ones. And it was always like that. It was throughout history. Conspiracy for so long until it was proven true. And even if it's only 1 out of 10 times the case, it can't be just outright dismissed, right? Common sense is something else. It has to include knowledge about so many dynamics with that topic and cross specializations, let's say. And no one can be omnipresent to know everything about every specialization. But relying on experts that don't themselves see the bigger picture, and you often can tell in the way they speak about certain things if they stay within a certain box or not, by simple listening to their choice of words. Okay, number 3, the ego first martyr. I am the righteous one. I stand on the right side of history. And that may be true. And it may not. Why they're stuck? Activism is their self-worth. It's that wishful image of themselves sometimes. Sometimes it's for the right cause, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the right cause with the wrong methods. And sometimes it's the wrong cause with the right methods. And a combination in between. But rarely the right cause with the right methods. Because there are always certain influences in certain directions, in certain infiltrations of certain groups by certain people, and It's all known. I mean, people say watch their actions, not their words, but watch both. And watch the consequences also. And all three of that, words, actions, and consequences, always in a bigger picture. They need to be morally superior to someone. Their worldview cannot tolerate uncertainty. They prefer symbolic gestures over actual solutions. It's also a thing. I mean, these are often basic philosophical questions. Like, are you helping? Are you really helping a homeless person by giving him $2 or something? Yes, in the short term. What does that do? It just encourages, on the other hand, and it's only one version of how you can see it, it encourages that begging is form of a solution that differs from the even from the start of thinking about the causes, not the symptoms. You know, it's never easy. And to say, if I wouldn't give him the $2, he might have just started that, because tackling the causes of him being homeless would take weeks, months, years, decades. You know, and what can I do to those bigger issues, right? And all of that. But there are also then those, if I don't, another will, or if I do, another one wouldn't, or make it worse. So many combinations of every of those paths we can think about that in every situation. Being investing emotionally and mentally and physically and financially and whatever, weeks and months and years into a good cause or something that seems like it, the wrong methods that are also presented as the right ones because of some fact there is a fact, but not emphasizing 10 other facts about that. You know, just because you hear that one story, vigilance, always vigilance. And that's the hardest thing to have. To every word, to every nuance, how something is presented from anyone. Because no one has all the facts ever. Not all of them. They can have many. Some people are really informed and they have most of the facts, but never all. So they fall into the moral drama, right? Heroes versus villains, with us or against us. Silence is violence and all of that, right? They become crusaders searching for evil so they can defend it, defeat it, and feel pure. I mean, it's mostly framing. It's not even mostly evil, it's sadly ignorance or a paycheck, right? How to crack them? You never challenge their righteousness directly, you attack their effectiveness. Questions like, how do you measure whether your activism actually helps the people you care about? Or what if the people you're fighting for would disagree with your methods? Or is your goal truth or victory? This exposes the difference between identity and reality. Number 4, the identity-fused activist. My cause, myself. If you question the cause, you're attacking me. Right? Why they're stuck? Their social belonging depends on conformity. Their self-image depends on group narratives. They fear exile more than truth. They only consume content that reinforces group identity. You know, propaganda hooks, tribalism, echo chambers, algorithmic grooming, moral panic cycles, and such. How to crack them? You don't argue. You create dissonance in the group identity. You can ask, has your group ever admitted being wrong about anything? You know, if it were proven that your group caused harm, would you want to know? Or is belonging more important to you than truth? I mean, there are subtle ways. You can do this, just they can be so narrowed in their views, and then the defender of the psyche comes to light, right? The defender against cognitive dissonance again. For most it's painful, and it's not, they feel it too personal. And also, the more they invest in a narrative, again, emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, even their time, the longer they do it, the harder it is for them to be even open to other facts that they missed or actively, subconsciously ignored. But such questions force them to confront the cause of their identity fusion. The real problem is misinformation, wrong opinions, lack of education, which are also themes in itself, right? But it's weaponized identity plus emotional manipulation plus narrative control. And fact checkers function as epistemic police, narrative enforcers, moral arbiters, and digital priests, not truth verifiers. Have you ever checked who finances those? And for what those people also stand for in their actions? I mean, why would some person who is a trillionaire or something care about certain issues? That people are so emotionally invested in, when this person himself showed with remarkable coldness how he doesn't care about certain people as long as he's making profit. Right? I mean, just questions like that. Any source of any information should be at least questioned. Why someone is saying something in a certain way or presenting some facts that may not even be facts, but only distorted and out of context, it takes time. It takes time that no one seems to have to truly sit down and research and read through all those boring long reports and, you know, to see what they're truly saying, and then cross-reference and background checks on each of those, you know, and their stories and where they're coming from. It's work. True reporters, those who are day and night on it because they do it with passion, those are out there who do this for their own peace of mind, let's say, not for a paycheck. Everyone who does it for a paycheck is biased. Period. Or is, through his contract or hers, forbidden to say certain things in a certain way, or encouraged to present something in a certain way. They all need to have approval for every story. There's always someone who reads that and says, this has to go, this you can expand a little, and those who write articles for a paycheck, either they do it that way, or they're the next homeless ones. You know, this carrot for money, because we have our bills still in the 21st century, but that's another story. I mean, think about it. The truth, who knows? Every narrative can be as complex as that you need weeks or months to really study it. And you still can't really know if it's true or not. That's why, on the one hand, many scientists are so rigorous in their methodologies of proving something. Mathematicians have it the easiest, right? It's either or, and there is no, but in storytelling, in the world of narratives, there are always nuances, there are always gray zones, there are always just even unaware, even unwillingly, even subconsciously choosing a certain word for a certain thing or a situation or whatever touches people more or less consciously or subconsciously on whole different levels. We think in language, but we pay way too little attention to it. Every action, unless it's a reaction from the amygdala or something. It starts with a thought. If you burn your hand, of course, you don't think about, oh, it burns, and you hold it there. Oh, it burns. It's pain. It's unpleasant. I don't want it. Maybe if I, you can't do that. Your hand would already be melted. You just react. But when we hear such stories, we can't take the time to step back from the initial emotional reaction that is very often intended by the writers or by their superiors. Just take a minute or two or 5 or 3 weeks, but don't be manipulated to an emotional reaction in a certain way. That would be a good start. We sadly can't expect the majority to truly research everything. There's just a constant flood of noise and news. But before we take action for some cause, it might be advisable to take some time, research some more, and really think this through. Because some solutions are worse than the cause in the long run. That's also a key, in the long run. And some of those solutions inevitably lead to some other problems to become themselves causes for the next issues. How would someone sell you something, some idea or some product, if you never had a certain issue? They would create either the issue directly or there can be two or three flies with one hit. With one solution to one problem, creating an incentive in people to get to a certain solution that would create a cause for a certain thing to be an issue. Which solution then? You don't think that there are people who can plan this? Think tank groups? Don't you think there are people who are really smart and know psychology and sociology and group dynamics and all of that to get to a point C through issue A and B. So it doesn't seem anymore it's ABC. But oh, this is not related. A and B are not related. But both solutions, causes for their initial thought of solution C, that neither group of A or B would accept outright. That would be enraged by even the audacity of this proposition. But done it in that way. So it's not obvious where to point your finger at afterwards. That stuff happens sometimes. At least sometimes. And there are agendas which are long known and in the official documents. Which rarely anyone has ever truly read. I'm always astounded by how many people I asked, have you actually read that? Charter or whatever, their mission and vision. It's mind-boggling how few truly did. Awareness, vigilance, emotional collectedness, patience, but I would say soft persistence. Would be a good thing. Arguing just incentivizes the other to entrench themselves even more into their positions. We would need to learn just I mean, I thought so long about this and I'm still not sure, because also there is no one way fits all. You can get to some people in a certain way and to some other people in another way. They're not dumb. They just don't have all the information, or are too too invested into keeping a certain view of certain things or certain people or certain ideas, ideologies or dogmas or whatever. The uncertainty, the fear of that uncertainty is the common denominator mostly, in most of those stories. I say, let's at least understand that. Understanding that eliminates most of the anger type reactions to that. They're not evil, they're not dumb, they're mostly ignorant, which basically only means they could know something, but they don't. If they just would learn it, if we just could incentivize them to at least look into it, plead to their good heart, good intentions, and their intellect, or depending on the type, right? But as a friend, or even as a brother or sister, it's much more effective than putting them down or blaming them. I mean, no one has the whole truth. We always work with what we have. Just awareness of where someone is coming from, and many of these things are coming from trauma, one or other type. We can get into that another time. It's a whole big topic. But you can also listen to people like Gabamate or no one is free from that. Even he himself said, and he is a damn smart man, and still, long time he was an addict. First he was workaholic, then he was, always compensating some things for some, until it just clicked and he realized, he wasn't evil, he wasn't dumb. The psyche has a way to fool all of us in one way or the other, at one time or the other. We're all just people. We're all guilty of that. Don't be so hard on them, and also don't be so hard on yourself. Every one of us fell into some logical fallacy or the other, at one time in life or the other, But again, I can never say it enough. We're all in the same boat. with all of this. So much for today. Love you, brothers and sisters.